Yes, sir. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you first for your presence here, Professor, as well. Thank you so much. For everyone who's participating as who's Portuguese, just a quick introduction. This fifth session of the fifth edition of the Euro Defense Jovem Tertúlias or conferences will be held in English due to the topic being of this is a topic that was worked in the framework of the Euro Defense Network of the European Working Group Climate, if I'm not mistaken. Exactly. With us, we have here Professor Brígida Brito. I'm not sure you were part of the group. You were head of the group.
I'm the head of the group.
Yes. So yeah. Professor Brígida Brito, the head of that group. So as a quick bio of Professor, I will say that Brígida Brito is an associate professor, deputy director and head of quality at the Department of International Relations of the Universidade Autónoma de Lisboa and coordinator of the Masters in International Relations. She is deputy director of Observare and editor of Janus Net, an e-journal of international relations. She is also an integrated researcher at the Portuguese Institute of International Relations of the new University of Lisbon, Nova Lisboa, and she has a PhD and a master in African Studies, a degree in sociology, and postdoctoral research in environmental education in African islands. She collaborated with other universities like Beira Interior, University of Évora, Universidade Lusófona de Humanidades e Tecnologias, and the Escola Superior Agrária de Coimbra. She collaborates also with the Air Force Academy of the Portuguese Armed Forces. Her research interests are related to international cooperation in conjunction with the socio-environmental issues, including international agreements on the environment, the impacts of climate change and responses, local intervention in environmental preservation, including environmental education programs, and finally, the conservation of endangered species promoted by international partnerships. In parallel with her academic activities, she has carried out consultancy work evaluating development cooperation projects in Portuguese-speaking African countries, such as Angola, Guinea-Bissau, and São Tomé and Príncipe, and promoted by international organizations as the World Bank Group and the International Labour Organization and STEP Portugal project, and by Portuguese, Guinea-Bissau, and São Tomé and Príncipe Civil Society Organization, or NGOs, with EU funding and under bilateral cooperation in the Ministry of Labour. Professor, we welcome you here. And as we have stipulated, 30 minutes speaking time, and then we'll have a debate conversation. Okay. Thank you very much once again for being here with us.
Okay, let me put my glasses. Good afternoon to all. It's a great pleasure to be at Euro Defense today and to participate in the Tertúlias. I'll start by sharing with you two notes. Firstly, I must thank the president of Euro Defense Jovem, Vitaly, for inviting me. It's a pleasure. And secondly, I have to recognize that my English is limited and needs to be improved. So I hope that I will be comprehensible as possible. And I apologize for my notes, but I'm sure it will be better with my notes. So the topic of this tertulia is climate change, trajectory towards insecurity. This is a very broad topic that has many implications. So let's start with the framework. I gotta do it. It doesn't go.
Okay.
I don't know why, but
the computer is too far away.
Deixa eu ver qualquer coisa.
Now it went. Let's go back.
It's okay, thank
It's
you.
working.
Miguel. So let's start with the framework, the international valorization of the environment, a long and slow process, uncertain in its results, with peaks of importance, but also marked by absences. The first awareness consisted in the idea that the environment and natural resources are mostly scarce, limited and finite, requiring a slowdown in use. Here we have the realization that the environment is more than the utility we take from it. So the valorization of the environment begins by being closely associated with two central topics, sustainability and climate change. Later, other subjects become more prominent, such as biodiversity, ecosystems, waste, energy. Related to each one, we can identify international meetings, summits, partnerships, agreements, and reports. The COP 28 is an example of the slow result and the long-term work around this topic. So, as far as the central theme that brings us here today is concerned, the focus is on the climate issue. And in this context, the evolution has been too long and slow. It all starts with the term of global warming, resulting from the rise in the temperature of the air and the water of the oceans, talking about the problem of melting ice and rising sea levels, threatening areas at low altitudes in relating to sea level, small islands, communities based on the coastline and the riverside areas. But in addition to the problem of the global warming, the academic and scientific community studying the subject has focused on an increasingly and obvious reality, the extreme weather events. Those events have become more frequent and have a greater impact from a socioeconomic and environmental point of view. So at this point, the concern has grown beyond the merely environmentalists. Oh God. Reading to reach the civil community, the sphere of political decision, technological and scientific innovation, sustainability in the temporal sense of the future generations, and solidarity has come to be threatened by the clouds of the climate change and its impacts. In this sense, clouds is in a figurative sense, but well adjusted to the reality. The climate change has become a topic of the scientific discussion, not always consensual, or for a long time without consensus. On the one hand, the defenders of natural causes, which are the result of historical evolution, certainly deterministic and explained by glacial transitions. On the other hand, those who work about environment recognize human activity as the main causal factor in climate change, the anthropogenic causes. So let's look at the chart that identifies the top 10 emitters of greenhouse gases and contributors to the climate change. In this point, the position of China and the United States is indisputable, followed by the European Union as a whole. And that is marked to understand better the importance of the European Union here. The graphic clarifies the sectors that have the greatest impacts in the climate change: energy, transports, building, agriculture, and industry. And the following map, this one, helps us to realize the regional discrepancies. It's very interesting to look to the pink color, European, and to search Portugal as a small circle, very small circle. The Germany, the most important, France, Italy, and Poland in this European case. It's very interesting to understand that besides this analysis that put the European Union in third place of the emitters, when we look much better and inside the reality of the European Union, we understand that we are all different and we have 8 difference. So the data is very important to reinforce the evolution of the climate issue over time and with reference to the periods of the Industrial Revolution. The initial periods in which emissions worsened and which allowed us to reach the industrial production and consumption patterns we have today. Let's look at the graphics of the evolution of the air temperature. The first one on the left, on the right of the sea temperature of the oceans, and we may understand that the temperature is going up, and then of the sea level, and the sea level is going up too, is rising too. Those 3 scenarios are very worrying. It should put us a concern because we have to do something about this, and we have to control those levels that are growing up very, very fast. When we understand what is the meaning of the extreme events, the big storms characterized by the cyclonic winds that are marked with the blue arrows in the map, sharp temperature fluctuations, heavy rainfall or lack of it, we understand the importance of the map. The blue arrows show areas affected by cyclonic winds and intense storms, which are often exacerbated by geophysical activity, the earthquakes and tsunamis. If we look to the European context, one of the points that we may mark is Lisbon as a city that are threatened, that have risk about the earthquakes and the tsunamis. So the problem is much more profound when these events occur systematically with greater impacts in areas that are defined by their vulnerability. This means low adaptive capacity, lack of prevention, and limited resolution. These territories are at high risk, all of them, who are marked with red or orange, are the most important problems in these contexts. Socio-environmental threats aggravate vulnerabilities, highlighting the risk of a catastrophe of a disaster, but distinguishing it from an occurrence. There are different types, there are different problems. One thing is the risk, another thing is the occurrence. So those are situations. One can put us in the other problem, but they are different topics, different problems. Globally, the number of extreme weather events has increased exponentially, in particular since the mid-90s. Floods associated with storms, prolonged droughts, let's consider periods of drought more than 5 years, and forest fires, wildfires, that have gained prominence. It's so significant that in addition to all the intrinsic losses, it's estimated that only in 2021, the associated financial losses amount to 280 billion of United States dollars. We are talking about the whole picture, and if we look at the information on the map, we can see that some regional areas are more affected than others. In the European context, the tendency is for hydrological events such as floods and meteorological events such as storms. We may look to Greece and Italy with droughts, and we have three problems there, okay? So the hydrologic, the meteorological, and the climatological. Those three are the most severe. By the way, in all of the world, those are the three more important events in all the continents. The next map, this one, is very confusing because it has lots of information. I tried to highlight the 4 factors that raise the most questions, okay? Water, food, health, and regional stability. In fact, the limits or the absence of the first 3, water, food, and health, is reflected in the 4th, through the insecurity that is generated by conflicts associated with the control and the use of resources. You may look to the details after, because those 4 principal main problems are very related, in fact. Extreme weather events then result in the loss of vital resources, such as the air, the oxygen, the water, and the soil that give us food. So those are the vital resources and generate uncertainty in life patterns, income acquisition, and availability, creating feelings of insecurity and vulnerability, which means that significant parts of the population are faced with forced displacement. This is the most important problem that we have about security. People that are forced to displacement. They can't stay in their countries, not in a volunteer way, but it is forced. In 1976, Lester Brown of the World Watch Institute created the concept of the environmental displaced person. And some years later, 9 years later, by invitation of the United Nations Environment Program, UNEP, Essam El Inawi, an Egyptian who coordinated the National Research Center in Cairo, distinguished very clear between three categories of persons. They seem very similar, very straight, but they are different, in fact. Those categories are often confused. The environmental migrant, the displaced person by environmental conditions, and the climate refugee. The first, as a migrant, he is a displacement marked by the volunteer. He chooses to move. He chooses the destination. He chooses the time, and he chooses how long he will stay away, and he chooses to come back. Okay. The later two, the displaced person and the climate refugee, are the result of forced displacement due to the impossibility of staying due to the risk to their lives. Threats of violations of human rights, it's a question of survival in this point. The big problem is that while the migrant does not have international protection status, the refugee requires this status, even though the framework of international law does not provide for the environmental cause. It is a framework of international law defined by the Magna Carta of the Geneva Convention, dating from 1951. In fact, it is therefore out of date. It should be revised. There's an author that I would like to mention you, and I think it's very understandable if you can read him or listen to him, because he has lots of classes in the YouTube, so it's very easy to find some references of Gregory White, an American professor who study and are working for a long time in the links between climate change and the forced displacement of people. He identifies 5 major factors that promote forced displacement for environmental reasons. The climate change and the extreme events, in first place, affect the availability of the access to vital resources, such as water and the river basins. In second place, limit and condition the production. We mean crops. In third place, influence the control of natural resources and management. We are talking about drought and water management. In fourth place, modify economic performance at national and regional level, about the demand of goods and services, and at least it promotes the emergence and worsening of conflicts between communities. It may have an influence of interethnic conflicts about this point in to dispute resources and the control of sources of income. All these factors cause various forms of aggression that can be seen as part of the international protection of people and are described in the Magna Carta of the Refugee. I go forward just to look to the points of the concept and the status of the refugee, and it doesn't mean in any point the environmental cause, but the topics are there. All the problems are the same. So, looking to the graphic elements as a perspective, in the global perspective, we can highlight it by the color of the topics. Lilac shows the regional areas most affected by storms, particularly tropical storms. The blue circles represent large river deltas, which, when storms occur, show the possibility of flooding. In yellow, the areas most exposed to desertification, affected by global warming and resulting in droughts. And the blue line around the continental areas indicates vulnerability to various factors, including the risk in rising sea levels. We have the green too, but the green, Arctic areas. So it's important about the risk in rising the sea level, but not so important for the other factors. So the risk of insecurity becomes a reality just because those are the factors that put the population at environmental risk, making them vulnerable in countries with limited adaptive capacity and no preventive actions. Euronews data indicates that between 2008 and 2019, the number of people displaced by environmental causes, it means forced displacement, reached 695,470 people. Lots of people, too much people. In this period, the main emitters were Russia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Spain, Germany, and France, with some variation in cause. In general, floods predominate with a significant weight of wildfires in the case of Spain, Russia, and France. It is common to consider that forced displacement due to environmental causes is directed towards territories that appear to be more stable or that show the capacity to adapt, either in a predictive or resolutive way. These are the cases of the European Union as a whole and North America, as the map shows. Forced displacement takes place initially in rotation movements and then crosses borders in the next phase. Therefore, extreme weather events promote fragile survival and represent major challenges to governance, whether local, national, regional, or global. We have lots of problems here to solve. At this point, as they are threats and or occurrence, the challenges of climate change involve a dual understanding: prevention in one hand, and the other hand, the resolution. Prevention at the time of risk, resolution at the time of occurrence. So we can say that from an international point of view, there is a responsibility to prevent and a responsibility to react. The first is easy to understand by the permanent work that underlies environmental education: molding, adapting, creating awareness, promoting appropriate behavior. We are changing people, and we are creating much more adaptive and resilient attitudes whenever the risk is there or whenever the occurrence appear. The second requires concerted international action through summits, agreements, negotiations, international cooperation, and emergency aid whenever necessary. One point, the first, is to prevent the disaster. The other point is to solve what is possible to solve, because some of the people will die, some of the people will disappear with an extreme event. Lots of people are going out, lots of people will dispute and will get a conflict to have all the resources available that are few. In fact, we, after all of those topics and those issues, we are going through the well-known Agenda 2030. In particular, when we look much better to the pictures, we have to stay in the Sustainable Development Goal 13, the climate action. Okay? This is the important in this topic, the most important in this topic. So when we are considering this Sustainable Development Goal, the 13, the climate action, it can be considered just because it creates impacts on all the other Sustainable Development Goals. This will influence all the other, affecting people, their livelihoods, and endangering their development and the sustainability. So the climate change, the climate action, the Sustainable Development Goal 13 can be analyzed in two ways that the image shows very well. On the one hand, it poses threats to development, but on the other one, it offers multiple opportunities. It depends on how we look at the problems. I guess you will ask about this summit, the COP28, the Conference of Parties 28, and the results. The results give us lots of expectancies. We have hope in the decisions, but we have to put our feet on the ground, just because all the decisions of the COPs are not vinculativas. Binding. Are not binding. So probably in the next year, we are discussing the same topics. Okay. Okay. I don't know if I overrun my time.
No.
But I have to thank your patience, your attention to understand what I say with my very bad English. But okay, I had too much pleasure to share those ideas with you, and I'm all free to discuss with you some of the points.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation. It was indeed very interesting. I think that we now will have some about 20 minutes to an open debate, to questions. I want to start first. I have one quite big question, for instance, on the balance between climate change or climate action and economical growth. So I think this was the most heated topic of the debate at the COP that ended yesterday, today, I might say. But for example, if we look at countries such as Nigeria, almost 200 or more than 200 million of inhabitants, a country that economically relies on oil exploration and other different natural resources. So if we impose on countries such as Nigeria, with a fragile economy, dramatic changes on climate issue, on CO2 emissions, for example, does it mean that we are provoking a huge flow of economic migrants to prevent the flow of environmental migrants? So maybe this is a question that I should address the politicians, but nevertheless, what kind of strategies do we have right now to keep this balance between climate action and economic sustainability?
Well, the transition on the oil to another sources, it will take time, too much time. It's not a strategy for tomorrow. It's not for 1 month. It's not for 1 year. Okay, it takes time. It have to take time. The most important topic of the globalization is the economics, not the environment.
Okay.
Okay, so it's the most important. It's what allows the world to move and to have evolution. So it's very difficult to consider the agreements of the conference of the parties, to assume that the transition will be very fast, and no, it will not. Okay, so it's not really a problem because we have time.
Okay.
By the way, the countries that produce and export oil, they don't look very in a very easy way this result. So it's we can't understand the decision of the conference of parties as a decision, an effective decision, because it's not. Okay. In the other hand, it's important in the North countries where we have and where we find the technological and scientific evolution, when we have lots of experiences of very different way to produce energy and to adapt energy, new energy, green energy, clean energy, to all the sectors, the economic sectors, the transports, the industry, the agriculture, the energy, whatever. We have to understand that we have to do something to produce well-being in the world. Just because Nigeria, we have a country that depends on the oil and in the natural gas. Okay, have two resources that have a very great demand in the world, and okay, it's important to create stability in economic way. Okay, there, just because of the employments, the formation, the investments that is done, but it is possible to introduce with a progressive understanding. We may introduce other resources. When we think about Africa, that is one of the most important continents that exports displacement, forced displacement in environment way, by environment causes. When we think on Africa, Africa has 60% of the potential of the sun energy.
Sun power, yes, exactly, yes.
And they only use 1%. So if they can introduce more technology to produce, to use, when we look to the map in the night, we look to United States with lots of lights, Europe with lots of lights, Asia with lights, some countries with lots of lights, and Africa is in the shadow.
Okay.
Okay. If they could use these resources, they could produce more, they could have more well-being that they now at the present they can't. So we have to balance. Yes.
Okay. Just to follow up then regarding the results of this COP conference.
Yes, in 1 year, probably everything will be in the same.
Exactly the same, but the main result, if I'm not mistaken, is that the countries have agreed to a zero emission by 2050.
Yes, but they will not get there in 2050.
Yes, but in comparison with the sustainability goals,
Mhm.
those goals are for 2030.
Yes,
And now the COP, it's like a postponement.
yes, but first, before the Sustainable Development Goals, we had the Millennium Development Goals. The Sustainable Development
Yes.
Goals are the heritage of the Millennium Development Goals.
It means that we are always postponing.
Yes, 2000 to 2015, then 2015 to 2030,
Okay.
and
Now
we
we're
will
taking
see
now it's
2030 to 2050.
We're taking steps towards
Yes,
that.
yes.
Thank you very much. I don't know if we have any more other questions. No questions in the chat. If there are no questions, I think that with the confirmation we do not have. Okay, so just not to end this too soon, but nevertheless, I think that this is the case for us to end this presentation, the final tertulia of this fifth edition. The title of this edition was Security in Transition, and we cannot have a transition without climate action. And okay, there is one question.
But
In the chat or? Okay.
Hi. I just wanted to thank you, Brigitte, for allowing us to, to be able to be part of this, to sit in on this, and for sharing this amazing information. It was great. So thank you very, very much. I have no Portuguese at all, so you're stuck with my English. Thank you so much.
Barbara.
And you too.
Thank you, thank you. And please don't misunderstand me. I'm not a pessimist, but I think that we have to understand those results of the summits with very slow and quiet and with tranquility, because the euphoria that those results may put in some minds are not very helpful to make a balance in the next year or in the next 10 years. Because if we had euphoria, probably we will be very frustrated. Okay, because we don't see We want, we can't see the evolution so far, okay? Thank you, Barbara.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Professor, once again for those words. And I think those words are actually perfect as a ending point for this final tertulia. As I said, its motto of this edition, of the fourth edition, was transition in Europe, security transition, and without climate change, it will be impossible.
Yes.
So, Professor Brigida, thank you very much for being here with us. Everyone who has been present here, also thank you very much. And I think we'll end with this. Thank you.
Thank you.